The desert doesn't whisper. It screams in the silence of the dead. Adeline Martin was alone, staring at the empty horizon where her fiancé's wagon tracks disappeared into the heat shimmer, taking her water, her dowry, and her future. She had two choices: let the buzzards pick her bones clean, or accept the hand of the scarred warrior watching her from the ridge. He offered life, but the price was her soul. "I will save you," he told her, his voice like grinding stones. "But you must walk into that fort as my wife. And in the Wild West, a lie can kill you faster than a bullet." The Nevada sun was not a celestial body. It was a hammer, and Adeline Martin was the nail. She sat in the dust, the silk of her blue traveling dress already stained reddish-brown, her bonnet hanging loosely by its ribbon around her neck. Her lips were cracked, tasting of salt and despair. 10 yards away, the contents of her trunk, her books, her mother's silver hairbrush, the lace tablecloth meant for a dining table in San Francisco, lay scattered in the dirt. They looked ridiculous here, like ghosts of a life she had already lost. "He isn't coming back," she whispered. The sound of her own voice startled a lizard sunning itself on a rock. Josiah Sterling, the man who had promised her a sprawling estate in California, the man her father had practically sold her to in St. Louis to cover gambling debts, had not merely left her behind. He had staged it perfectly. They had stopped to fix a broken axle. He had sent the guide, a nervous man named Pete, ahead to scout for water. Then Josiah had asked Adeline to step out and hold the horses while he checked the undercarriage. The moment her boots hit the sand, he had snapped the reins. He hadn't even looked back. She had run after the wagon for a quarter-mile, screaming his name until her throat bled, watching as he threw her trunk off the back to lighten the load. He had taken the water barrels, he had taken the rifle, he had taken the horses. Adeline checked the position of the sun. It was past noon. She had perhaps 3 hours of daylight left before the desert temperature plunged from an oven to a freezer. She had no weapon, no canteen, and no shelter. She stood up, her legs trembling. Adeline was 22, a schoolteacher who knew the dates of every major battle in history, but didn't know how to find water in a dry wash. She scanned the horizon. To the east, the purple bruise of the mountains. To the west, endless scrub brush. She began to walk. Not because she knew where she was going, but because sitting down felt like accepting the grave. She managed perhaps 2 miles before the heat haze began to play tricks on her. She saw fountains. She saw her father's library. She saw Josiah's face, laughing. She stumbled, her boot catching on her exposed root, and fell hard. The grit scraped the skin off her palms. "Get up, Addie," she gritted out, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Do not let that bastard win." She pushed herself up to her knees and froze. The silence of the desert had changed. The cicadas had stopped buzzing. The wind had died. She slowly lifted her head. Standing on a ridge about 50 yards away was a horse. It was a paint, muscular and still as a statue, and on its back sat a man. He was looking down at her. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. He wore buckskins that looked worn soft by years of use, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. A long gun rested easily across his saddle. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He simply watched, like a hawk deciding if the rabbit was worth the dive. Adeline's heart hammered against her ribs. She had heard the stories in St. Louis, stories of the Apache, of the Comanche, of travelers vanishing without a trace. She scrambled to her feet, swaying. "Help!" she croaked, waving a desperate arm. "Please!" The rider nudged his horse. The animal picked its way down the slope with terrifying grace, barely displacing a stone. As he drew closer, Adeline instinctively stepped back. He was terrifying. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and lean. His skin was the color of deep bronze, weathered by the sun. Jet-black hair hung loose to his shoulders, but it was his face that stopped her breath. A jagged scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, cutting through a beard that was neatly trimmed, surprisingly so. He looked like a man caught between two worlds, and at home in neither. He stopped the horse 10 feet from her. The beast snorted, smelling her fear. "You are far from the trail, woman," he said. His voice was deep, accented but speaking perfect English. It sounded like gravel tumbling down a dry well. I was left," Adeline stammered. "My fiancé. He took the wagon. He took the water." The man's dark eyes swept over her, taking in the torn dress, the sunburned skin, the desperation. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked calculating. "Josiah Sterling," the man said. Adeline gasped. "You know him? I saw his wagon an hour ago, moving fast toward the canyon pass. He drove the horses hard, like a man running from the devil." The stranger leaned forward, resting his forearms on the saddle horn. Or a man who just murdered his bride. "I'm not dead yet," Adeline said, a spark of anger cutting through her fear. "You are dead," he corrected calmly. "You just haven't stopped moving. You have no water. The coyotes will smell you by sundown. The Apache raiding parties are 2 ridges over. If they find you, you will pray for the coyotes." Adeline swallowed hard. "Can you help me? Please. I have money in St. Louis. My father—" "Your father sold you to Sterling," the man interrupted. "I heard Sterling bragging about it at the trading post in Fort Defiance 3 days ago. Said he got a discount on a pretty wife." Shame burned hotter than the sun on Adeline's neck. "If you know so much, then you know I have nothing. Why did you come down here?" The man swung his leg over the saddle and dropped to the ground. He was taller than she expected, towering over her. He unhooked a canteen from his saddle and tossed it to her. Adeline fumbled to catch it, uncorking it with shaking hands. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Slowly," he ordered, "or you will retch." She forced herself to stop, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you. Who are you?" "My name is Soren," he said. "The Apache call me Goyathle when they are not hunting me. You can call me Soren." "Soren," she repeated. "Will you take me to the fort?" "Fort Defiance?" Soren looked at the horizon, his expression unreadable. "I am going to Fort Defiance, but I cannot take a white woman there. Not like this." "Why not?" "Because there is a price on my head in that territory, and a war party on my heels in this one. If I ride in with a white woman tied to my saddle or sitting behind me, they will hang me before I can speak. They will say I kidnapped you." Adeline felt the hope drain out of her legs. "So, you're leaving me?" Soren stepped closer. The smell of sage, leather, and horse sweat enveloped her. He looked into her eyes, and she saw a strange intensity there. Not cruelty, but a fierce, burning necessity. "I need to get into Fort Defiance," Soren said quietly. "I need to speak to the colonel before the new moon. It is a matter of life and death for my people. But the gates are closed to the Apache and closed to me." "What does that have to do with me?" "A man traveling alone is a threat. A scout is a target," Soren said. "But a man traveling with his wife? A settler and his bride seeking refuge? The gates will open." Adeline stared at him. The desert wind whipped a strand of hair across her face. "What are you saying?" "I will save you, Adeline Martin. I will give you water. I will give you my horse. And I will protect you from the raiding parties, Soren said. But you must be my wife. The words hung in the hot air. You must be my wife. Adeline laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. You want me to pretend to be your wife? To get you into a military fort? Not pretend, Soren said, his face stone cold. The colonel at Defiance is a stickler for paper. He checks manifests. He checks registries. If we ride up lying, we both hang. There is a mission outpost 10 miles south of here, in the Box Canyon. Father Gabriel is sympathetic to my kin. He will marry us. Tonight? You're insane, Adeline whispered, stepping back. I won't marry a stranger in the middle of nowhere. I am engaged to Josiah Sterling. The man who left you for buzzard meat? Soren raised an eyebrow. You are loyal to a corpse, woman. Look at me. He stepped closer, invading her space. Josiah Sterling didn't just leave you to die. He's going to claim your inheritance. He will tell the world you died of heat stroke, or Indians took you. He will play the grieving widower and spend your money on whiskey and cards, unless you ride into that fort alive, on the arm of a man who saved you. Adeline felt a cold rage replace her fear. Josiah. He was probably drinking cool water right now, laughing about the foolish girl from St. Louis. Why do you need a wife, Soren? Really? She asked, her voice steadying. If you are so skilled, surely you can sneak into the fort. I need to walk through the front gate, Soren said, his voice dropping to a rumble. I need to look the colonel in the eye in the daylight. I have something to deliver. Something that cannot be delivered from the shadows. And I need a witness. A white witness. Someone whose word they will accept over a savage's. He pointed a gloved finger at her. You are that witness. You are a lady of breeding. They will believe you. If you are my wife, your status protects me. If I am your husband, my skills protect you. It is a trade, a business arrangement. And when we get to the fort, Adeline asked, what then? Then we dissolve it, an annulment. Or I disappear, and you are the widow who survived. I do not care. I only need the entry. Adeline looked at the gun on his saddle. She looked at the endless, empty desert. She thought of Josiah Sterling's smirk. 10 miles south? She asked. Soren nodded. We must move now. The Apache scouts track by the shadows. When the sun hits the peaks, they will be hunting. Adeline took a deep breath. She walked over to the horse. My name is Adeline. If you touch me, if you try to take liberties, I will shoot you with your own gun while you sleep. A rare, fleeting smile touched Soren's lips. It made the scar on his face ripple. Deal. Get on. The ride to the mission was a nightmare of heat and exhaustion. Adeline sat behind Soren, her arms wrapped stiffly around his waist to keep from falling. His body was hard as iron, moving in perfect rhythm with the horse. He didn't speak, his eyes constantly scanning the ridge lines. Twice he pulled the horse into the shadow of a rock formation and held his hand up for silence. Adeline held her breath, listening to the wind. Once, she thought she heard the yip of a coyote, but the tension in Soren's shoulders told her it was something human. They reached the mission at twilight. It was a crumbling adobe structure built into the side of a red cliff, hidden from the main valley. A wooden cross stood crookedly on the roof. Soren dismounted and helped her down. Her legs buckled, but he caught her by the elbow, steadying her. Can you walk? I can walk, she snapped, pulling her arm away. An old priest opened the heavy wooden door. He wore a brown robe patched with burlap. His face was a road map of wrinkles, but his eyes were bright blue and sharp. Soren, the priest said, his voice raspy. I did not expect to see you this side of the winter. Father Gabriel, Soren nodded respectfully. I need a sacrament. The priest looked at Adeline, taking in her tattered dress and the fierce set of her jaw. And who is this? This is Adeline, Soren said. We need to be married. Immediately. Father Gabriel looked between the two of them. He saw the desperation in the girl, the grim determination in the warrior. He sighed, opening the door wider. Come in. The soup is thin, but it is hot. The ceremony took place by candlelight in the small, dusty chapel. It was stripped of gold. Only a wooden altar remained. Adeline stood next to Soren, feeling like she was in a fevered dream. Do you, Adeline Martin? Take this man. She looked at Soren. In the flickering light, the scar on his face looked less frightening and more like a map of pain. He was looking straight ahead, his jaw locked. He was doing this for his people, he had said. I do, she whispered. And do you, Soren? What name are you using? The priest asked. Thorn, Soren said. Soren Thorn. Do you, Soren Thorn, take this woman? I do. Then by the grace of God and the necessity of these hard times, I pronounce you man and wife. There was no kiss. Soren simply turned to her. Rest now. We ride at dawn. The hardest part begins tomorrow. Adeline slept on a cot in the back room, clutching the blanket. She was Mrs. Soren Thorn. She was married to a man who was hunted by the Apache and the army. She woke to a hand over her mouth. The room was pitch black. Soren was leaning over her, his weight pressing her into the mattress. Quiet, he hissed in her ear. What is it? She breathed against his palm. Riders, he whispered. Not Apache. Men with heavy boots. Bounty hunters. Adeline's heart stopped. They are at the door, Soren said, moving his hand slowly. They are looking for me, but they will find us both. Remember, Adeline, you are my wife. You love me, and you are terrified of them, not me. Can you do that? Yes, she whispered, though she was shaking. Soren pulled her up. Good. Because if they find out who you really are, they will sell you back to Josiah Sterling for a finder's fee. Tonight, we play the part. A heavy fist pounded on the mission door, shaking dust from the rafters. Open up, Padre, a voice bellowed. We know you're hiding the half-breed. Soren grabbed his gun, checked the load, and looked at Adeline. For the first time, he took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. His grip was warm and surprisingly gentle. Showtime, Mrs. Thorne. The heavy oak door of the mission groaned as Father Gabriel unbarred it. He opened it only a crack, blocking the gap with his frail body, holding a lantern up to illuminate the intruders. Through the gap, Adeline could see the silhouettes of 3 men. They were backlit by the moon, dust swirling around their boots. The leader, a man with a heavy coat despite the heat and a low-slung holster, pushed the door hard. Father Gabriel stumbled back, the lantern swinging wildly, casting frantic shadows against the adobe walls. Sanctuary is for the righteous, Padre, the leader sneered, stepping into the chapel. He had a face like a dried apple, wrinkled and sour, with eyes that held no light. We're looking for a renegade. Goes by Soren. Some call him the Ghost. We tracked his paint to your trough out back. Adeline felt Soren stiffen beside her in the shadows of the nave. He didn't reach for his gun yet. His hand hovered inches from it, his breathing shallow and controlled. I have no renegades here, Father Gabriel said, smoothing his robes. Only pilgrims seeking God. Pilgrims don't ride Apache war horses, the leader said. He signaled to his men. Search the back. If he moves, put a hole in him. The 2 other men, grimy and smelling of stale tobacco, started forward. The leader's eyes scanned the dark corners of the chapel, until they landed on Adeline and Soren. Soren stepped into the light. He didn't look like a trapped animal. He looked like a king holding court in a stable. He draped a heavy protective arm around Adeline's shoulders, pulling her flush against his side. The contact was shocking, his body heat radiating through her torn dress. "There is no need to tear apart the Lord's house," Soren said, his voice calm, losing the rough edge of the accent he had used in the desert. He sounded almost civilized. "My wife and I are the only ones here." The leader, a notorious bounty hunter named Elias Vane, though Adeline wouldn't know that until later, narrowed his eyes. He thumbed the hammer of his Colt revolver. "Wife, you're the half-breed Soren. I've seen the sketches. There's $500 on that scar." "My name is Soren Thorne," he lied smoothly, "and this is Mrs. Adeline Thorne. We are traveling to Fort Defiance to settle a land claim." Vane chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. He walked closer, his spurs jingling in the silence. He stopped 3 feet away, the barrel of his gun pointing lazily at Soren's chest. "A white woman," Vane murmured, looking Adeline up and down. "Married to a savage?" "He's not a savage," Adeline said. Her voice trembled, but she forced her chin up. She remembered what Soren had said. "You are terrified of them, not me." She looked at Vane with wide, fearful eyes. "Please, sir. My husband has done nothing. We are just trying to get to safety. There are things out there." Vane ignored her, his eyes fixed on Soren. "You know, there's another poster circulating, boy. Came from a fellow named Sterling. Says a savage kidnapped his fiancée out near Dead Man's Wash. Says she was taken against her will." The air left the room. Adeline's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Josiah had lied. Of course he had. He had turned his betrayal into a tragedy to garner sympathy, and a posse to silence her. "She looks a hell of a lot like the description," Vane said, grinning. "Blue dress, blonde hair. Pretty little thing." He leveled the gun at Soren's head. "I think you kidnapped her. I think I'll kill you, collect the 500, and then take the girl back to Sterling for the reward. That's what I call a double dip." "She is my wife," Soren repeated, his muscles coiling. "Prove it," Vane challenged. "Kiss him, darling. If you're really his wife, and not some captive, show me." The demand hung in the air, gross and violating. Soren remained still, but Adeline felt the tension in his arm. He was calculating the odds. 3 men, 3 guns. If he moved, they would both die. Adeline turned to Soren. She looked at the scar, the dark eyes, the harsh lines of his face. She thought of Josiah leaving her to die. She thought of Soren giving her his water. She reached up, cupping Soren's bearded jaw with both hands. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise breaking his stoic mask. She pulled his head down and pressed her lips to his. It wasn't a tentative peck. It was desperate. She kissed him with all the fear and anger she had stored up since the wagon drove away. Soren froze for a split second, then responded. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer, his mouth moving against hers with a possessive intensity that made her knees weak. It was a performance, yes, but it felt dangerously real. She broke away, breathless, burying her face in his chest. "Please," she sobbed, and the tears were real enough. "Don't hurt my husband." Vane stared at them, his face twisting in disgust. He spat on the floor. "Hell, looks like she's broken in already. A woman who lays with a dog gets fleas." He holstered his gun. "Let's go, boys. I ain't hauling a squaw lover back. Sterling won't want her now, anyway." The bounty hunters turned and marched out, the heavy door slamming behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Soren didn't let go of her immediately. They stood there, chest to chest, breathing hard. When he finally stepped back, there was a strange colour high on his cheekbones. "You are a good liar, Adeline," he said quietly. "I wasn't lying about one thing," she said, wiping her mouth. "I don't want you to die." Soren turned to the priest. "We have to leave. Vane is smart. He'll camp a mile out and think about it. By dawn he'll realize the names don't match. He'll come back." "Take the back trail," Father Gabriel whispered, pressing a small bag of cornmeal into Soren's hand. "Through the slot canyon. It is dangerous, Soren. The flash floods. But it will hide your tracks." Soren nodded. He looked at Adeline. "Can you ride?" "I don't have a choice, do I?" "No," Soren said, checking his revolver. "You don't." The slot canyon was a wound in the earth, narrow and suffocating. The red walls rose hundreds of feet on either side, blocking out the sun and leaving them in a perpetual, cool twilight. They had been riding for 6 hours. Adeline sat behind Soren, her arms wrapped around his waist. The awkwardness of the kiss at the mission had faded into a grim necessity. They were one unit now, moving through a hostile world. "Why are they hunting you, Soren?" Adeline asked. Her voice echoed softly off the canyon walls. "Not just because you're Apache. Vane called you the Ghost." Soren was silent for a long time. The only sound was the rhythmic clop-clop of the horse's hooves on the stone floor. "My mother was Apache," Soren finally said. "My father was a cavalry scout. I walked between the worlds until the worlds decided they didn't want me. I was a scout for the army, Adeline, for 3 years. I thought if I served, they would leave my mother's village alone." "What happened?" "Major Sterling happened," Soren said. Adeline stiffened. "Josiah's father, the general. His brother. Major Marcus Sterling. He runs the supply depot at Fort Defiance. 6 months ago, the government sent winter rations for the Apache reservation. Blankets, beef, flour. Major Sterling sold it all to the miners in Virginia City and pocketed the gold." Soren guided the horse around a fallen boulder. "My people starved. 30 died in the freeze. When I found the ledger proving what he did, I took it. I went AWOL. Now, Marcus Sterling wants me dead before I can show that ledger to the colonel, who is arriving from Washington this week for an inspection." Adeline rested her forehead against his back. "That's why you need to get into the fort, to expose him." "Yes. But a renegade Apache with a stolen ledger is just a thief. A man with a white wife? He is a citizen with a grievance. You make me credible, Adeline." "And Josiah?" she asked. "Is he part of it?" "Josiah is a weak man," Soren growled. "He likely knows. Maybe he needed your dowry to cover his uncle's debts. Or maybe he just didn't want a wife who asked questions." The anger boiled in Adeline's stomach, hot and acidic. She had been a pawn in a game of corruption she hadn't even known she was playing. "Stop!" Soren said suddenly, reining the horse in. "What is it?" Silence. The canyon was too quiet. No wind, no birds. Even the trickling stream seemed to have hushed. "Get down!" Soren ordered, his voice low and urgent. "Get behind the horse." Adeline slid off the paint's rump, her boots hitting the sand. Soren dismounted in one fluid motion, pulling the Winchester rifle from its scabbard. He slapped the horse's flank, sending the animal trotting further down the canyon to safety. "Soren!" Adeline whispered, crouching behind a rock. "Not Vane," Soren said, his eyes scanning the rim of the canyon far above them. "Apache. Renegades. The ones I warned you about." A gunshot cracked through the air, echoing like a thunderclap. A puff of dust exploded near Soren's boot. "Move!" Soren shouted, grabbing Adeline's arm and dragging her toward a cluster of boulders. Another shot rang out, chipping the stone inches from Adeline's head. She screamed, stumbling, but Soren hauled her up. They dove behind a large slab of fallen sandstone, just as a hail of bullets chewed up the ground where they had been standing. "They are high up," Soren said, checking the chamber of his rifle. "They have the advantage. They will pin us down until dark, then come down to finish it." "Why are they shooting at you if you're Apache?" Adeline cried, covering her ears. "To them, I am a traitor, a scout for the blue coats, and I have a white woman. To them I am worse than an enemy." Soren popped up, fired a snapshot toward the rim, and ducked back down as return fire sparked against the rock. He hissed in pain. "Soren!" Blood was blossoming on his left shoulder, dark and wet against the buckskin. A ricochet or a graze, but it was bleeding freely. "I'm fine," he grunted, but his face was pale. "Adeline, listen to me. They are going to flank us. One will stay up top to keep our heads down. The others will climb down the wash behind us." He shoved a heavy Colt revolver into her hands. It was warm and smelled of gun oil. "I need you to watch the wash," he said, locking eyes with her. "If you see a shadow move, you shoot. Do not hesitate. If you hesitate, we die." I can't," Adeline stammered, the gun shaking in her hands. "I've never shot a person." "You aren't shooting a person," Soren said intensely. "You are shooting the thing that wants to kill you. You are shooting Josiah Sterling. Pretend it is him." He turned back to the rim, firing again. Adeline crawled to the back of their shelter, staring down the dry wash that wound its way behind the boulders. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. She gripped the heavy gun with both hands, her knuckles white. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun began to dip, casting long, terrifying shadows across the canyon floor. Every rustle of dry brush sounded like a footstep. Then she saw it. A movement in the shadows. A figure, silent as smoke, dropping from a ledge 20 yards away. He had a knife in his hand, the blade glinting in the fading light. He was moving toward Soren's blind side. "Soren!" She tried to yell, but her voice failed. The attacker lunged forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Adeline didn't think. She didn't imagine Josiah. She simply reacted. She raised the heavy Colt, aimed at the center of the rushing mass, and pulled the trigger. The gun kicked like a mule, nearly flying out of her hand. The roar was deafening in the confined space. The attacker crumpled mid-stride, hitting the sand with a heavy thud. He didn't move. Soren spun around, rifle raised, but saw the threat was down. He looked at the body, then at Adeline. She was sitting in the dirt, the smoking gun lying between her legs, her eyes wide and vacant. "Addie," he said softly. High above, a bird call, a fake human signal, echoed. The shooting from the rim stopped. The renegades had lost the element of surprise. They were leaving. Soren moved to her, gripping her shoulders. "Adeline, look at me." She looked up. Her face was streaked with dust and tears. "I killed him." "You saved me," Soren corrected. He took the gun from her numb fingers and holstered it. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled her into his arms, but this time there was no audience. No bounty hunters. No priest. He held her because she was shaking apart, and he was the only thing holding her together. "We have to move," he whispered into her hair. "The gunshot will draw others. But you did good, Adeline. You are a warrior." "I just want to go home," she wept into his buckskin shirt. "I know," Soren said, his voice rough with pain from his shoulder. "I will get you there, I promise, even if I have to carry you through hell." He stood up, wincing, and whistled for the horse. As the paint trotted back, Soren struggled to lift the saddlebag. His left arm was useless. "Let me," Adeline said, wiping her face. She stepped forward, her hands steadying. She tightened the cinch, her movements efficient. She wasn't the schoolteacher from St. Louis anymore. The desert had taken that girl. "Can you ride in front?" Soren asked. I might need to lean on you." "Get on," Adeline said. She mounted the horse, and Soren climbed on behind her. He felt heavier now, his heat feverish. He wrapped his good arm around her waist, his head resting heavily against her shoulder. "Keep heading south," he murmured, his voice slurring slightly. "Don't stop for anything." Adeline Martin took the reins. She looked at the long, dark canyon ahead. "Hold on, Soren," she said. "I've got you." The moon was high and mercilessly bright when the horse finally stopped. It wasn't Adeline who pulled the reins. The animal simply refused to take another step up the shale incline. "Soren?" Adeline whispered. There was no answer. The heavy weight against her back listed dangerously to the left. She twisted in the saddle just in time to grab his buckskin shirt as he slid toward the ground. "No, no, no!" she gasped, struggling against his dead weight. He hit the dirt with a sickening thud. Adeline scrambled down, nearly twisting her own ankle. Soren was lying on his back, his breath coming in ragged, wet rasps. The entire left side of his shirt was soaked black in the moonlight. They were in a small box canyon, sheltered on three sides by towering rock walls. A trickle of water seeped from a crack in the stone nearby. A small miracle in the wasteland. Adeline knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his chest. "Soren, wake up, please!" He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. They were glassy, unfocused. "Leave me," he muttered, his voice thick. "Take the horse. Go south." "I am not leaving you," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "You made me your wife, Soren Thorn. You don't get to quit now." She dragged him. He was immensely heavy, dead weight, toward the shelter of an overhang near the spring. She used every ounce of strength she possessed, digging her heels into the sand, grunting with effort until he was propped against the stone wall. She built a fire. It was small, made of dried sage and dead mesquite roots, but it gave enough light to see the damage. It was bad. The bullet hadn't grazed him. It had lodged deep in the muscle of his shoulder, just below the collarbone. The skin around the wound was angry and swollen, heat radiating from it that she could feel inches away. "The bullet is still in there," she whispered, horror rising in her throat. Soren looked at her, clarity returning to his eyes for a brief, painful moment. "It has to come out. If it stays, the poison takes the blood. Then I die." He reached for the knife at his belt with his good hand, but his fingers fumbled and dropped it. He was too weak. He looked at her. The request was in his eyes. Adeline stared at the knife. It was a Bowie knife, the blade 7 inches long, sharp enough to shave with. "I can't," she said, backing away. "I'm a school teacher. I teach children their letters. I don't cut people." "You shot a man today, Adeline," Soren rasped. He closed his eyes, sweat beading on his forehead. "You are not a school teacher tonight. You are the only thing keeping me from the dark." He pointed to the saddlebag. "Whiskey, in the flask. Pour half on the knife. Give me the rest." Adeline moved like a machine. She fetched the flask. She held the knife over the fire until the blade turned soot black. She ripped a strip from her petticoat, the fine silk ruined days ago, and soaked it in the spring water. She knelt beside him. "This is going to hurt." "Do it," Soren gritted out between his teeth. She poured the whiskey over the wound. Soren arched his back, a guttural roar of pain tearing from his throat that echoed off the canyon walls. Adeline sobbed but didn't stop. She poured the rest down his throat, forcing him to swallow. Then she took the knife. The next 10 minutes were a blur of blood and horror. Adeline had to dig. She had to put her fingers inside a human being. Soren thrashed once, then passed out from the pain, which was a blessing. Adeline wept as she worked, her hands slippery, her stomach churning. But she found the lead slug. With a sickening clink, she dropped the deformed piece of metal onto the stone floor. She cleaned the wound, packed it with a poultice Soren had in his bag, a foul-smelling paste of herbs, and bound it tightly with strips of her dress. She didn't sleep that night. Soren burned with fever. He thrashed in his sleep, muttering in a language she didn't understand. Apache, she assumed. He called out names: Nala, Goyathle. And once, clear as a bell, Marcus. Adeline bathed his forehead with cool water from the spring. She held his hand. She watched the stars wheel overhead and thought about the girl who had left St. Louis in a carriage with dreams of a tea set and a parlor. That girl was dead. She had died in the desert. Around 3:00 a.m., Soren settled. His breathing deepened. The heat radiating from his skin began to cool. Adeline curled up next to him, exhaustion finally claiming her. She rested her head on his good shoulder, her hand resting over his heart to make sure it was still beating. When she woke, the sun was blinding. She sat up with a start. The fire was dead ash. Soren was watching her. He was pale, his eyes shadowed, but he was awake. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen before. It wasn't the look of a captor, or a protector, or a business partner. It was the look of a man seeing a miracle. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. "I told you I would." Adeline brushed the hair from her face, conscious of how she must look, blood on her dress, dirt on her skin. Soren reached out with his good hand and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed away a smudge of soot. "You have the heart of a panther, Adeline. My people would sing songs about you." Adeline felt a flush rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "How do you feel?" "Like I was kicked by a mule and then trampled by the herd," he admitted, trying to sit up. He winced but managed it. "But the fire is gone from the blood. You saved me." "We are even," she said softly. "You gave me water. I dug a bullet out of you." "No," Soren said seriously. "We are not even. I owe you a life debt, and I pay my debts." He looked at the horizon. "We are close. Fort Defiance is a half-day ride. Can you do this, Adeline? The danger in the desert is honest. A snake bites because it is a snake. The danger in the fort is different. It smiles while it cuts your throat." "I can do it," Adeline said, standing up and smoothing her ruined dress. "I have a husband to protect." Soren stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Then let us go meet the colonel." Fort Defiance rose out of the dust like a mirage of order in a land of chaos. High wooden palisades cut a geometric square into the scrub brush. The American flag snapped crisply in the wind atop the watchtower. From a distance, it looked safe. It looked like civilization. But as they drew closer, Adeline felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. They had stopped a mile back at a river. Adeline had washed the worst of the blood from her dress and hair. She had braided her golden hair severely, trying to look like a respectable woman who had simply had a hard journey rather than a refugee from a massacre. Soren had washed, too. He had trimmed his beard further. He wore his hat low. With the buckskins cleaned and his demeanor shifted, he looked less like an Apache warrior and more like a rugged frontiersman. "Remember," Soren said, as the gates loomed ahead. "I am Soren Thorne. We are here to see Colonel Braddock. We have a land claim dispute. You do the talking if they ask about family. I do the talking about the land." "And the ledger?" Adeline asked. Soren patted the saddlebag. hidden in the lining. If they take me, Adeline, if they separate us, you must get this bag. Take it to Colonel Braddock. Give it only to him. Not to Major Sterling, not to anyone else. They won't take you, she said firmly. You are my husband. They rode up to the main gate. 2 sentries in blue uniform stepped forward, bayonets crossed. Halt, one shouted. State your business. Soren halted the paint horse. He sat tall, despite the pain that must have been tearing through his shoulder. Soren and Adeline Thorne, seeking entry to file a claim and resupply. The guard squinted at them. He looked at Soren's scar, then at Adeline's face. You look like you've been through the grinder, folks, the guard said, lowering his rifle slightly. We ran into trouble near the canyon, Soren said smoothly. Rock slide, lost our wagon. Lucky to be alive. The guard nodded sympathetically. Rough country. All right, head on in. Report to the adjutant's office if you want a billet for the night. And ma'am, he tipped his cap to Adeline, welcome to Defiance. The heavy gates creaked open. They rode through. The noise of the fort washed over them, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the shout of drill sergeants, the laughter of laundresses. It was a bustling town within walls. Adeline felt hundreds of eyes on them. A white woman riding with a scarred, dark-skinned man was a curiosity. She held her head high, resting her hand possessively on Soren's thigh as they rode. Let them look, she thought. Let them see he is mine. The headquarters is that big building at the end of the parade ground, Soren murmured. That's where Colonel Braddock will be. They tied the horse at the hitching rail. Soren dismounted stiffly, leaning heavily on the rail for a second before straightening. He offered his arm to Adeline. She took it, feeling the tension in his muscles. They walked across the dusty parade ground. The sun was setting, casting long orange rays across the wooden porches of the officers' quarters. Adeline, Soren whispered, his grip on her arm tightening. Don't stop walking. Don't react. What is it? 12 o'clock on the porch. Adeline looked up. Standing on the porch of the officers' mess, holding a crystal glass of whiskey, was a man in a pristine grey suit. He was laughing at something a soldier had said, his head thrown back. He looked healthy, wealthy, and without a care in the world. It was Josiah Sterling, and standing next to him, smoking a cigar, was a man in a major's uniform. He had the same nose as Josiah, but his eyes were colder, harder. Major Marcus Sterling. Adeline's step faltered. The world seemed to tilt. The man who had left her to die was standing 50 feet away, drinking whiskey while she was covered in dust and dried blood. Steady, Soren murmured. We walk past them. We go to the colonel. But it was too late. Josiah turned. His gaze swept over the parade ground, idly watching the newcomers. His eyes passed over Soren, dismissed him, and then landed on Adeline. He froze. The glass in his hand slipped, shattering on the wooden planks. The sound cut through the evening chatter like a gunshot. Adeline! Josiah choked out, his face draining of color. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. Adeline stopped. A cold, deadly calm settled over her. She released Soren's arm and took a step forward. Josiah, she said, her voice carrying across the silent yard. Major Sterling stepped to the railing, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Soren. He recognized him. Adeline saw the recognition flicker in the Major's eyes, the realization that the ghost was standing right in front of him. You're dead, Josiah stammered, gripping the railing. I saw the Apache take you. I reported it. Did you? Adeline asked, her voice rising. Did you report that you stole my dowry? Did you report that you unhitched the wagon and left me with no water? Or did you just report that the poor, helpless girl was gone so you could cash in? A crowd was gathering. Soldiers stopped drilling. Wives came out of the general store. "She's hysterical," Josiah shouted, looking around desperately. "The heat! The trauma! She doesn't know what she's saying." Major Sterling pulled his service pistol. "Guard, arrest that man!" He pointed at Soren. "That is the renegade Apache murderer. He's kidnapped this white woman and brainwashed her." 4 soldiers rushed forward, rifles raised. "No!" Adeline screamed, stepping in front of Soren, spreading her arms wide. "He is not a kidnapper. He is my husband." The declaration rang out, stunning the crowd. Even Major Sterling paused. "Husband?" Josiah laughed, a high, frantic sound. "You married him. You married a savage. I married a man," Adeline spat, "which is more than I can say for you." "Arrest them both!" Major Sterling roared, losing his patience. "He is a spy and a thief, and she is clearly an accomplice." The soldiers moved in. Soren pushed Adeline behind him, his hand going to his gun, though he knew he couldn't win this. There were too many. "Wait!" A booming voice came from the main headquarters building. The doors swung open, and a grey-haired man with the golden eagles of a colonel on his shoulders stepped out. He walked with a limp, but his presence commanded immediate silence. "Colonel Braddock." "What is the meaning of this disorder?" Braddock demanded. "Colonel," Major Sterling said, stepping down the stairs, sweating slightly. "This man is the renegade I told you about. Soren, the one who stole the supply ledgers. He has clearly abducted this woman." "He saved me," Adeline shouted. "Colonel, my name is Adeline Martin. Adeline Thorne. This man, Josiah Sterling, abandoned me in the desert to die. Soren saved me. And we have proof of who the real thief is." She pointed a shaking finger at Major Sterling. The colonel looked from Adeline to Josiah, then to Soren. He looked at the defiance in Adeline's eyes and the calm dignity in Soren's stance. "Proof?" the colonel asked. Soren reached slowly into his shirt. The soldiers tensed, fingers on triggers. "Slowly, son," the colonel warned. Soren pulled out a folded, leather-bound book, the stolen ledger. Major Sterling's face went purple. "He's armed. Shoot him." "Stand down," Colonel Braddock barked. "I will have the head of the man who fires a shot." Soren stepped forward, bypassed the major, and handed the book to the colonel. "Read the last entry, Colonel," Soren said, his voice loud and clear. "You will see where the winter beef went. You will see why the children in my village froze to death. And you will see the signature authorizing the sale to the mines." Colonel Braddock opened the book. The silence in the fort was absolute. He read the page. He looked up, his face grim. He looked at Major Sterling. "Major," Braddock said quietly, "your signature is on a bill of sale for 2,000 government blankets to the Virginia City Mining Corp." "It's a forgery," Sterling yelled. "The savage wrote it." "He can't write," Josiah shouted, trying to help, but making it worse. "Actually," Soren said, "I was educated at the mission school. I write better than you, Josiah." Colonel Braddock closed the book with a snap. "Guards." The soldiers looked confused. "Sir, arrest Major Sterling and arrest Mr. Josiah Sterling. Confine them to the brig pending a court-martial." "You can't do this," Josiah shrieked as the soldiers grabbed him. "I have rights. She's my fiancée. That's my money." "She is Mrs. Thorne," the colonel said coldly. "And it appears you are just a thief." As they dragged the screaming Josiah and the sullen major away, the adrenaline finally left Adeline's body. Her knees gave way. Soren caught her. He held her up before the entire fort. "It is over, Adeline," he whispered. She looked up at him. "We did it." "Yes," Soren said. He looked at the colonel, then back at her. "The deal is done. You are safe. You can have the annulment now. You are free." Adeline looked at the scar on his face. She thought of the fire in the cave. She thought of his hand in hers at the altar. She straightened up, smoothing her dress. She turned to the colonel. "Colonel Braddock," she said, "my husband and I are quite tired. Could you direct us to a room? One room." Soren froze. He looked at her, his dark eyes wide with shock. Adeline smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I believe I promised to stay with you, Soren, and I don't break my promises." Soren slowly smiled back, the expression transforming his face, making him handsome, making him whole. He offered her his arm. "This way, Mrs. Thorne." The regimental doctor finished stitching Soren's shoulder and left the small officer's quarters, clicking the door shut. The silence that followed wasn't the desperate quiet of the desert. It was heavy with the inevitable. Soren sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at the floor. "The colonel has arranged your passage to San Francisco," he said quietly, refusing to look at her. "They found your dowry in Josiah's saddlebags. You can go back to being a lady, Adeline. You can find a husband who doesn't have a price on his head or a scar on his face." Adeline stood by the window, wiping the last of the desert dust from her hands. "I had a husband who was a gentleman," she said, her voice steady. "He knew which fork to use at dinner, and he left me to die of thirst for a handful of gold." She turned, crossing the room to stop inches from him. She reached out, tracing the jagged scar on his cheek. Soren flinched, unused to a gentle touch, but he didn't pull away. "Then I met a man who had nothing, who owed me nothing, yet gave me his water and walked into a lion's den to save me," she whispered. "You call this a business arrangement, Soren, but when I shot that man to save you, that wasn't business. I am not leaving." Soren looked up, his dark eyes searching hers for pity, but finding only fire. "I am a hard man, Adeline. People will whisper. They will stare. Let them stare," she answered fiercely. "Let them see what a real marriage looks like." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days, and pulled her in with his good arm. He kissed her then, not for an audience of soldiers or bounty hunters, but for them. It was a promise sealed in iron and blood. 3 years later, the sun set over a sturdy ranch house near the Verde River. Soren rode in from the pasture, dusting off his hat as he handed Adeline a crumpled letter from the east. "Josiah is dead," he said simply. "Prison fever in Yuma." Adeline didn't even read it. She tossed the paper into the fireplace, watching the last remnant of her old life turn to ash. She turned back to her husband, the man who had built this home with his own hands. "Dinner is ready, Mr. Thorne," she smiled. Soren smiled back, the haunted shadows finally gone from his eyes. They had survived the desert, the betrayal, and the lies. Now, they had the only thing that mattered, the peace they had fought for, together. And that is the story of Adeline and Soren, a love forged in the brutal heat of the Nevada desert. Adeline started as a victim, betrayed by the man who was supposed to protect her, but she ended as a warrior who found strength she never knew she had. It really makes you wonder, what defines a savage? Was it the man living in the wild who offered his water to a stranger? Or was it the gentleman in the fine suit who left his fiancée to die for money? In the Wild West, appearances were often the deadliest lie of all. What would you have done if you were Adeline? Would you have taken the annulment and gone back to society? Or would you have stayed with the outlaw who saved you? Let me know your choice in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, justice, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.